I heartily welcome you all to mathematics class this morning. Now, if you take a look at the question on the board, this is one of the questions that most students are always afraid of, using completing the square method to solve a quadratic equation. But trust me, this morning I promise to make the concept crystal clear by trying to solve the question step by step. Now, we want to start. The question states, solve the quadratic equation by the use of completing the square method. And the equation is 2x squared minus 3x minus 9 is equal to 0. Now, what is the first step? The first step is to reduce the coefficient of this x squared to 1. We want to reduce the coefficient of x squared to 1. And what would that involve? That would involve dividing through by 2. It is the coefficient here. Now let's do that. So we divide this by 2, this by 2, while this one also by 2, and this 0 also by 2. Now with that, 2 will cancel 2. Then we'll be left with x squared. And that is what you want. You want to reduce the coefficient to unity, that is 1. Now having done that, we have minus 3 over 2x minus 9 over 2 is equal to 0 divided by 2, that is equal to 0. Then what next? The next is to collect like terms. We want the variables to be together and the constants to be together. That is, numbers with letters to be together, then numbers without letters to be together. And that will lead us to transferring this minus 9 over 2 to the right hand side. Now this becomes x squared minus 3 over 2x is equal to 0 plus 9 over 2. Then this now becomes x squared minus 3 over 2x is equal to 0 plus a particular number will give us the same number. So 0 plus 9 over 2 is still 9 over 2. Then what is the next step? The next step now is to make the expression at the left hand side to become a perfect square, as the name of the method implies, completing the square. So we want to make the expression at the left here to become a perfect square. So what are we going to add to this expression so that it will become a perfect square? Now pay attention to this. What we are to add is the square of half of the coefficient of x. I repeat it, the square of half of the coefficient of x. And immediately we do that, this expression here will become a perfect square. So we are going to prove that. Now let's go. The coefficient of x here is minus 3 over 2. So let's find half of that. Half times minus 3 over 2. Then we are now going to square the expression. 1 times minus 3, that is equal to minus 3, over 2 times 2, that is equal to 4. Then everything is raised to power of 2. So immediately we add this to this expression here, it will definitely become a perfect square. Now let's go. So this now becomes x squared minus 3 over 2x plus minus 3 over 4 all square. But in mathematics, in order to balance an equation, whatever you do to a particular quantity, you must equally do it to the other quantity. So now we have added minus 3 over 4 squared to the left hand side. So it is a must for us to do the same to the right hand side. And this will now lead us to adding that same minus 3 over 2 to the right hand side. Now, so this is equal to 9 over 2 plus minus 3 over 4 all square. Now the equation is balanced. Now I said this expression here at the left hand side has become a perfect square. So how come? So I want to do that now. So this is the same thing as x. Go to this bracket, don't ignore any sign that is there. So minus 3 over 4, everything raised to power 2. Do you know that what I have written, this square, is the same thing as everything we have here? So we are going to confirm that. Let's do that. X minus 3 over 4 raised to power of 2. Now this is the same thing as x minus 3 over 4 times x minus 3 over 4. Now x times x, that will give us x squared. Then x times minus 3 over 4, that will give us minus 3 over 4x. Then the next is to turn to this. Minus 3 over 4 times x, that will also give us minus 3 over 4x. Then minus 3 over 4 times minus 3 over 4, that will give us plus 3 over 4 all square. Because minus times minus will give us plus. Now, this is the same thing as x squared minus 3x over 4 minus 3x over 4, that is equal to minus 6x all over 4. Then plus 3 over 4 all square. Now, if you reduce this to the lowest term, 2 here 2, 2 here 3. Now this becomes x squared minus 3x over 2 plus 3 over 4 all square. And that is exactly what we have here. X squared minus 3 over 2x plus 3 over 4 all square. Because minus 3 over 4 all square is the same thing as 3 over 4 all square. Do you agree with me? Minus 3 times minus 3, 9. Over 4 times 4, 16. Then 3 over 4 all square, 2 is also 9 over 16. So what I have here now is the same thing as what is here. So that is the confirmation. Now let's proceed to the next step. Now the next step is this. We are going to simplify the expression at the right. So 9 over 2 plus minus 3 square means minus 3 times minus 3. And that is equal to 9 over 4 square, that is 4 times 4, that is equal to 16. And this now becomes x minus 3 over 4 raised to power of 2 is equal to, then since this is a fraction and we want to add it, then we are going to find the LCM. So what is the LCM of 2 and 16? Definitely that is 16. 16 divided by 2, that is 8. 8 times 9, that will give us 72. Plus 16 divided by 16, that is 1. 1 times 9, that is 9. Now we have x minus 3 over 4 all square is equal to 72 plus 9. That is equal to 81. 81 over 16. Now I want to rewrite this expression here. We have x minus 3 over 4 raised to power of 2 is equal to 81 over 16. So what is the next step now? The next step is to remove this square. so that we will be able to find the value of x. How do we remove the square? We are going to take the square root of both sides. We want to take the square root of both sides. Now take the square root of both sides. Take the square roots of both sides. Now if you take the square root of both sides here, this square will automatically be removed. How is that possible? Square root of a number simply means the number is raised to power of 1 over 2. That is the meaning of square root. And you talk about cube root. Cube root means the number is raised to power 1 over 3. So if you want to take the square root of this, that means this expression x minus 3 over 4 raised to power 2 then will be raised to power of 1 over 2. Then it's equal to plus or minus 81 over 16 also will be raised to power of 1 over 2. Now, why did I write plus or minus? This is another question to ask. Now, I have written this plus or minus to indicate that the square root of a number can either be positive or negative. For instance, I can say minus 4 times minus 4, that will give me 16. Then 4 times 4 will also give me 16. So I can say the square root of 16 is either minus 4 or 4. So that is why I have written this plus or minus, to show that this can be positive or negative. Now let us proceed. Now according to law of indices, whenever a number is raised to a power, and that power is raised to another power, the law states that we are just going to multiply the powers. And that is what I want to do now. 2 times 1 over 2. That will give me 1. 2 here 1, 2 here 1. Then as a result, the square has been removed. Now this now becomes x minus 3 over 4 is equal to plus or minus. Now, what is the square root of 18? Don't forget, 81 over 16 raised to power half here means square root of 81 over 16. Now, square root of 81 is 9, while the square root of 16 is 4. So this is plus or minus 9 over 4. So what is the next step? Collect like terms so that you'll be able to find the value of this x. Now, this now becomes x is equal to plus or minus 9 over 4. If this minus 3 over 4 is transferred to the right hand side, it will become plus 3 over 4. It will become plus 3 over 4. So if that is the case, x now is equal to plus or minus 9 over 4 plus or minus 9 over 4 plus 3 over 4. What does this mean? This means plus 9 over 4 plus 3 over 4, or minus 9 over 4 plus 3 over 4. So now x is either plus 9 over 4, which is written simply as 9 over 4, then plus 3 over 4. 9 over 4 plus 3 over 4 is equal to 12 over 4. Since they have the same denominator, we don't need to go through a lot to find the addition. So 12 divided by 4 is equal to 3. X is 3. Or x can be equal to minus 9 all over 4 plus 3 over 4. Since they have the same denominator, can just say minus 9 plus 3. That is minus 6 all over 4. Then 2 here 3, 2 here 2. So x is equal to minus 3 over 2. Therefore, the value of x is equal to 3 or minus 3 over 2. So I want to believe this has been made crystal clear. Method of solving quadratic equation, that is completing the square method. So with this now, I want us to derive a formula that people call almighty formula, that is quadratic formula, with the use of this completing the square method. And that is what you want to do right away now. So don't go, still sit down, let us enjoy that. How we can derive quadratic formula by the use of completing the square method. So I want to rub off the board now and start that using completing the square method to derive a quadratic formula. Now permit me to rub off the board. All right. Now the standard quadratic equation has this formula: ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So this is a standard quadratic equation. Now we want to use completing the square method to solve this in order to derive what people call almighty formula. So now let's start. As I began with the other time, I have to reduce this coefficient to unity, and that will involve dividing through by the coefficient of x squared. So what is the coefficient of x squared here? That is a. So I will divide this by a, this by a, this by a, this by a. Then a cancels a, and that will be equal to x squared plus bx over a plus c over a is equal to 0 divided by a is equal to 0. Then the next step is to collect like terms. So we have x squared plus bx over a is equal to 0. If I transfer this here, this will become minus c over a. And that becomes x squared plus b over ax is equal to minus c over a. So the next step now is to change this expression to a perfect square, just as I had done the other time. And how do we do that? We find half times the coefficient of x. And what is the coefficient of x here? B over a. So half times b over a, then we are going to square the expression. And that will lead us to 1 times b, b over 2 times a, 2a. Then everything is raised to power of 2. Now, as we did the other time, if I add this to this expression, it will definitely become a perfect square. So x squared plus b over ax, then plus b over 2a all square is equal to, don't forget, whatever we do to a quantity in mathematics, we must equally do it to the other quantity. Then this becomes minus c over a plus this same b over 2a all square. Now, this is a perfect square as we had done the other time, and in order to write it of that form, I'm going to come to this bracket. The sign here is plus, so x plus b over 2a all square. So this is exactly the same as this. It has been proved. Then is equal to minus c over a plus b squared, that is b raised to power 2 over 2a squared, that means 2a times 2a, and that is equal to 4a squared. Then this becomes x plus b over 2a all square is equal to, we need to find the LCM. The LCM of a and 4a square is 4a square. 4a square divided by a, that will give us 4a. 4a times minus c, that is minus 4ac. Then plus 4a square divided by 4a square, that is 1. 1 times b square, that is b square. Now this becomes x plus b over 2a all square is equal to, this is the same thing as b square minus 4ac. Do you agree with that? Minus 4ac plus b square is the same thing as b square minus 4ac. So all over 4a square. Then the next step, we need to remove this square. So take the square root of both sides. So if you take the square root of both sides, this will become x plus b over 2a. The square root will be removed. Then this will now have root b square minus 4ac all over 4a square. Now let me put the root here so as not to be confused. So now with this, we have x plus b over 2a is equal to, we cannot actually find the square root of this compound expression. So we are going to leave it with the root, b square minus 4ac. Then over the square root of 4 is 2, while the square root of a square is a. Then the next step now is to collect like terms. Let this plus b over 2a be transferred to the right hand side. And this will become x is equal to plus or minus. I forgot to include it here. Don't forget what we did the other time. Square root of a number can either be plus or minus. So x now becomes, if plus b over 2a is transferred to this side, it will become minus b over 2a. Then plus or minus, don't forget, root b square minus 4ac all over 2a. With this, they have the same denominator. Then what do we do? And this becomes x is equal to minus b plus or minus root b square minus 4ac all over 2a. And this is what people call almighty formula. But the name actually is quadratic formula. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share. Thanks so much.